Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Rob Kracht, that's Dutch. I'm CSR Communication Manager for Tarkett EMEA, with a special focus on sustainability and health and well-being. I'll be hosting this very special discussion today with our esteemed panelists around health and well-being in the workplace in general, but with a particular focus on indoor air quality. Before I introduce panelists, I would like to take a couple of minutes to set the scene and introduce Tarkett. Employee well-being is a cornerstone for attracting and retaining people and for long-term business success, that's clear. We all know that the past 12 months have taken its toll, and many of us will return to the workplace a bit off balance, or maybe a huge bit off balance. Much has been said about the need to change the way we work and how we design spaces with a greater focus on users' practical needs and their broader well-being. And this is at the heart of our business. Tarkett believes in doing business in a holistic way. We work closely with our partners and the wider commercial interior industry to help deliver safer and healthier environments where people can revive again. At Tarkett, we call this commitment human conscious design. That means making conscious decisions to create flooring solutions that are good for people and for the planet. And we've been doing that for more than 140 years now. And we launched the first recycling-focused circular economy initiative in 1957, which is a very good year, by the way. And we have worked tirelessly to raise indoor air quality standards for more than a decade. It's not something that became important because of this pandemic. It's in the genes of this company for a very long time. And human conscious design also means developing a deep human understanding, which we have been doing in part through our global rethinking workplace research. To date, this research has captured the wants and needs of more than 15,700 office workers all over the globe. The research shows that indoor air quality is now the most pressing concern amongst office workers. And while the focus in the last 12 months has been on the airborne virus, poor indoor air quality also has significant negative effects on cognitive performance and our emotional state. So today we're going to explore how employers can design solutions that help protect employees from these often invisible health and well-being hazards with 3 workplace well-being experts. With them, we will discuss some of the areas that need significant focus and consideration for the longer term, with a special focus on indoor air quality. And let me introduce you to these very special panelists. Dr. Mike O'Neill, author and founder of Human Space. Dr. Mike is an author and strategist who specializes in how to use workplace design to reduce stress and improve workplace performance. He founded Human Space to help businesses identify the workplace capabilities that are most important to employee well-being. He's using therefore artificial intelligence and including healthy buildings. Adrian Harbager, design lead for CBRE in Chicago. Adrian is the design lead for CBRE's growing design practice in Chicago and has more than 15 years of experience as a certified interior designer. With a focus on workplace interiors, she has provided award-winning design solutions for brands like McDonald's, Bank of America, Humana, LinkedIn, Dyson, and Amazon. And Dr. Whitney Austin Gray, Senior Vice President at the International Wellbeing Institute. Standing at the nexus of public health, research, and the places and spaces we spend our lives, Dr. Gray has become one of the leading global voices for improving buildings and communities to help people thrive. She leads research that supports best practices in building design and operations, community development, and organizational policies that can contribute to improve public health for everyone, everywhere. Are these specialists or are these not? So we're going to ask them some questions. You can ask them questions as well, but please put them in the Q&A. Because then we will not be able to cover all the questions, but when you put them in the Q&A, we will come back after the session with answers to these questions. So let's start with the first question. I'll start with Adrian. The question is, what are the greatest threats to employee well-being as businesses move back to the office? Adrian, what is your opinion on that?
So I see 2 challenges here, or 2 threats. The biggest one is not to make any changes at all. We're in a really unique situation, for better or worse, where companies have had almost a year to pause and reevaluate while their staff has not been in the office. We're working from home. There's been a microscope on health and wellness, and companies have really been challenged to address employee wellness in a way that they've never been before, and to make sure that the office is safe when their employees return. As designers, we've been working hard, even pre-pandemic, to put a spotlight on employee wellness and to make it something that is commonplace rather than an amenity. So it would really be a shame to now go back when we've had this time of pause and reflection and not to make some sort of changes. The second threat that I see is for companies that do make changes, how are you going to maintain these over time? We're creatures of habit. It's very easy for us to fall back into bad habits. And as we start to get busy again, and as things start to pick up and we return to this new normal, I think it can be very easy for some organizations to fall back into old habits and old patterns and to stop conversations around well-being. So it's going to be really important to set up a regular cadence of check-ins and check back with our employees on a regular basis to see how things are going and how these new processes that we've put in place are working, and to change and adapt and keep going over time instead of doing it a one-time thing.
Is there someone else in the panel who wants to add something to that? Mike?
Yeah, I would just echo. I would think as we talk about the biggest threats for the returning workforce, I think one of them is definitely that, Rob, as you alluded to, that we've kind of conducted this grand experiment on humanity. Let's see what happens if we isolate people for a year and then send them back into the office. And so I think there's going to be a global stress pandemic from the trauma suffered from the lockdown for a whole variety of reasons. They're all becoming painfully aware. And so, and what's scary about it is that with the pandemic, with a physical, health issue, you can kind of see that. You can see when somebody's sick. It's visible. It's around you. But stress is more of a hidden epidemic. And I think it will reverberate through our society and through the workplace for years to come. And so I think and I also think that stress is kind of that root cause of a lot of problems that we've had way before the pandemic. I think it's a root cause of poor engagement. I think it's a root cause of poor performance, and so on and so forth. And it's just going to be amplified by what we've all been through. And I think, so that's very negative, but on the positive side, if there are things we can do with management culture and with well-being practices and with the physical workplace to try to mitigate that, even a small amount, then we can really positively affect this transition that we're all making back and maintain it. I think to Adrian's point, kind of keep that conversation going.
So you don't think
and
that
I can
just
add to that a little bit, Rob?
Whitney.
Oh, sure. So I would go as far as to say that COVID is, of course, an infectious disease, but I would also say it's a chronic disease. And we will see the impact on the mental health, as Dr. O'Neill pointed out. In fact, I do look at the biggest issue in our workplaces this decade will be around mental resiliency, mental well-being. And I want to really reiterate this point that physically people may feel safe returning, we hope, and we're going to dig into how we can make sure people feel physically safe. But will they feel mentally safe to return? And I think every employer should be asking themselves, are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to manage not just the work people do, but the person that's doing the work that's returning? Because it's going to be a phased return. And I think there's a lot of really powerful models out there as we're looking to really heal the country. And I am a firm believer that you don't use the term new normal, mostly because it just feels like a Band-Aid. And it came out the first couple of months of the pandemic where people are like, just put a Band-Aid on it and we'll just call it the new version of how we're living. But I think for many of us that do this research, I don't want to return to a toxic environment. I don't want to return to the normal commute. And so we need to think about a new now. I've heard this term, but also I'd say just bright future that we're, to Adrian's point, deeply having to learn from where we came from to create sort of the future going forward. And it is the largest workplace experiment experiment ever, as Dr. O'Neill pointed out, where we are working from home. If we don't make pivotal changes to create, I think, physical safety and mental safety in the return to work, you're going to see people really trying to furiously catch up and already be behind if they're not starting today on that path.
So you don't think that just going back to the office is taking away stress? I mean, we all know that we've been missing our colleagues the most. So it's just going back, you would expect that that would take away a little bit of stress, but you don't see it like that. You think that we have to do a lot more to be sure that the stress is taken away. Is that a fact?
I think we have to have.
Yes, I could.
Oh, well, just quickly. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's going to be stressful going back. People have been isolated. I've been reading more and more about people going back to the, dreading going back to the office because they can't remember how to interact anymore. And I think that building a new kind of management culture where, trust as a foundation and empathy, which isn't normally valued in management and leadership, is going to be part of an answer.
And Rob, stress isn't bad. So it's just when it overloads our system and we don't have the capability to cope with that stressor. So of course, you're going to be stressed returning. People are more oversensory because they are under threat. And when you're under threat, you take in your environment and you don't just walk in and assume things are great and get down to work, right? You are assessing the environment. You're oversensory to everything from airflow to cleaning practices to smells in the environment. You may have forgotten what that really annoying neighbor sounded like when they were on a phone call next to you all day and you couldn't get work done. Well, you'll remember real fast because you'll be taking all this in at one time when you're returning. Do keep in mind, and this is a really important point, and I will build off of Jeff Jernigan's work with Rex Miller here, is that I do believe that we are in a state of trauma. And Dr. O'Neill pointed that out too. And so there are different levels of trauma, but we are all going through, and the brain actually operates the same pathways for trauma. So even if that trauma is minor, we've all gone through a trauma collectively. And you don't just the next day go, I can't wait to walk into work and be super productive for 10 hours. We will be going through a healing phase. And that's why I say the companies that are ahead of understanding physical and mental safety and return to work will actually, I think, be able to embrace a return where that stress of people coming back into the office is not all negative. It can be a very powerful and positive experience.
I have a good question for you on that. It's the second question I want to pose to you because how can businesses give employees a greater say in office design, allowing them to feel more in control? What do you think?
I really focus on this idea of people first places or people first companies. So let me spend a moment sort of describing that. So if you took a job, BC, before COVID, and they hired you, you were expected to change your whole life. You needed to move across country. You needed to find a school for your children. I don't care when you like to wake up or when you like to go to sleep because this is the work hours of the office. I don't care what you want to wear into the office to make you feel comfortable. I assume you will wear this. I don't care when you want to work out. I don't care necessarily what time you eat lunch or when you want to have a snack, or if you're a new mama and you need a break, or if you have a need to step out and call a loved one that's dealing with a health issue. I expect you to be at your desk 9 to 5 in a beige desk with beige carpet in a beige office, and I want you to commute a couple hours a day, and I want you to change your life for this job. So I'm saying this, Rob, I love your face right now. You're like, no, that's the past. It is the past. I really hope it's long in the past. So that actually when you were looking at employees, the employee is actually saying, you know what? I want to determine when I come into the office. I want to determine when I work best. I want to determine when I can have a wellness walk or a break. I want to eat the food that I love. I want to meditate in the afternoon. I want to pick up work after, in the evening to be a little flexible so I can come home to see the children. Wow, that starts to feel different. I want to come into an office that's light and bright, and I'm not in a cramped home office. I want to have space and peace of mind to be able to focus on my work versus having to manage a lot of the stimuli at home. So we're going to be seeing, I think, a shift from being sort of employee-led workplaces from employer-led workplaces. So kind of like the real estate market, when you talk about it's either a buyer's market or a seller's market, I would sort of posit we are now in an employee market versus the employer market. So the employees are going to start to say, I want certain control over my life, and it's okay for me to ask for wellness. It's okay for me to ask for a break or to shift a couple hours or to think about how I can live at my highest, best self to work most productively, versus in the past where the employer said, you will change everything you do for your wellness in order to work productively. The era of burnout, right? You will do what you need to do to get the work done. And I deeply hope we are shifting to more employee-led understanding of wellness moving into this decade.
Yeah, we should all be able to arrange our life, so our work around our life and not the other way around. But I saw Aideen, you want to add something?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to kind of build on that, because I completely agree. We need to get to a place where all of the employees are involved in designing. So when we're looking at building a new space these days, it's really important for us to bring in the folks that want to be included in that journey from the start and be mindful that everyone has a different amount of time to dedicate to these things, and the design process is a long one. But we encourage our clients to spread out that engagement. So when we're designing new spaces, we want them to have a wide cross-section of their employees involved in that process. It's not a top-down, it is an employee-led type of process. So we use surveys and focus groups, we have a core team, and then, breaking down from that core team, we have several steering committees that are from, everyone from someone in the mailroom to marketing to HR. It's everyone across the corporation that's feeding decisions up to that core team. So everyone feels like they're involved in that design process. And then once the design is kind of established, it's about communicating those decisions back to the entire organization so that people feel heard and they feel empowered, and they know that when they come into the office, it was designed with their needs in mind.
I think Mike wants to add something to that.
Yeah, I guess I would just build on what Dr. Gray and Adrian are saying. Fundamentally, going way back, there's a lot of research on the idea of user control. And that was more around job design, where a healthy job design is one where you may have very high cognitive workload and demands, but if you have a lot of autonomy over how to do the job, that can actually be a healthy job, because then you can take that stress and use it in a constructive way. And so I think what we're all talking about here too is translating that idea of user control to a broader venue to give people choice over, when they come into work, what location they're working at, to choose the location within the office if they're in there that matches their needs. And I do believe, and our research shows that idea of user control is really, really powerful. And I think it is going to be key to getting people back to work, and preserving their health. I think that's kind of foundationally like what Dr. Gray was saying. The old way was kind of give up your life and fry yourself to a crisp, and because you've got to perform, like a very, very, very narrow definition of what people are. They're like, it's all about just performance at the cost of everything else. And now we're realizing that that's not sustainable, and that you have to have a sustainable approach to work, and that control can be a part of that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Dr. O'Neill's points, I think, are so critical. I mean, this is deeply embedded in occupational research around how we understand how people work at their best. If you are dealing with overwhelm and you can control even the small things, this is critical for our feeling of grounding. So there's actually some early experiments, I'm not recommending to replicate these, where they actually, on the wall thermostat, gave users control of moving it up or down 3 degrees, although the temperature didn't change. And then they asked people, were they more comfortable, basically, or were they happy after they were able to change the wall thermostat? And although there was no actual change in temperature, they reported yes. Now, of course, if it was at up or down 5 degrees, it starts changing a bit. There's sort of a magic number there with that up 3, down 3. However, ask yourself, when you're overwhelmed, what do? You seek out control. And I think this is really important for so many people in our community listening in today. If you are a building expert, you are now a public health advocate. You are a public health champion. And years ago, the Surgeon General put forward that designers are public health advocates, because your job is in part to make the invisible visible for the occupants in that space. And so you need to convey what is happening with the air quality when I don't feel air changes. You know, if just because I smell Lysol, is it clean? No, is the answer. In fact, that could even be harmful for your health, and we're happy to talk more about that today. But I really just want to emphasize that when people feel overwhelmed, when you give them information, when you make the invisible visible, they then gain control and a sense of control. When you give them environmental ways that they can make even minor modifications, it gives them control. And there is a massive gap right now where people do not understand how buildings work.
No.
And they don't trust buildings right now. And buildings either make you sick or they make you healthy, right? And so I think it's really up for our community out there is to be the leaders and advocates and translators and to help people feel more in control. And we do that, you know, through knowledge, and we do that through some of the strategies that Dr. O'Neill was pointing out. And those are absolutely possible to be able to set the stage for as your employees are returning.
Can I make it more specific now and then putting the question to Dr. Mike? Because we were talking about indoor air quality. What are the potential long-term effects of poor indoor air quality?
Well, you know, there's long-term and short-term effects, and I'm sure Dr. Gray probably knows more about some of this than I do. He's a little bit more of an expert, but there's been studies done in children's educational settings to show that poor air quality almost immediately affects performance. And I think there's been some work as well in more traditional duplicating work settings for adults. So it has these immediate performance effects, and then of course, a longer term poor air quality can affect you physiologically as well. And it is such an important issue. And I think it's obviously been elevated by people's concerns about returning to work because of the potential for encountering an aerosolized virus that's, you know, kind of floating around. And so there's that very real health concern, but then there's that sort of invisible kind of problem of dealing with the performance impacts of poor indoor air quality.
And Adrian, does CBRE sees that as a problem? Do you tackle that if you look at building an office?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been top of mind lately, obviously, as we've been helping bring employees back into the office and through our reset program. And, you know, as a design professional, it's our job to educate the end client and kind of make them aware of, like Dr. Whitney said, that invisible thing that you can't see that is such a problem. So we partner with our MEP team, who they are the experts, and I definitely defer to them. But I like to tell my clients, kind of like putting an ACE bandage on a broken leg when they want to just put a plastic screen up and go back to the office. It's going to make you feel better because you can see it, but it's not getting to the actual root of the problem. You need to bring in the experts. You need to do a diagnostic. You need to get in there and fix what you can't see.
Dr. Gray, the next question is
Sure.
perfectly for you. How can employers tackle indoor air quality, according to you, or can or should?
Sure. So maybe I'll build off the previous question and then add some strategies there.
Okay.
So to begin with, air quality is very interesting because humans have a very strong biofeedback loop so that we can sense certain things in the air quality. And I oftentimes call this my canary research, which means that if you're familiar with canaries in the coal mine, is that they have very sensitive respiratory tracts. They were able to detect carbon monoxide, and they of course told the miners to get out before there was a larger issue because they could detect the carbon monoxide. Humans cannot detect it until, unfortunately, it's actually too often too late. So we have many canaries in the workplace. Have you never sat next to someone that said, I have a migraine today, it's really stuffy in here, or oh wow, like this, if something smells funny, and someone else says, oh, it's no big deal, like I don't smell it. Wrong, 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 wrong. Pay attention to your canaries and get out, because they're actually probably more sensitive and they're picking this up, and they're actually a huge asset. So some of us have different sensitivities in our biofeedback loop to be able to sense different indoor air quality issues. Formaldehyde is another one of those. VOCs, there are people that are more sensitive than others, right, to smell. That does not mean you're not being affected, just the same. Then when it comes to air quality, we also look at things that we cannot detect. So pathogens are an example of that. So you, considering that tens of thousands can live in the diameter of a human hair, you're not detecting a pathogen, right? So we look at other indications of air quality that will help us, such as airflow, air change issues that we are able to detect on that, right? If you are in a situation where you have poor indoor air quality, you can have acute immediate effects, the biofeedback loop. You also can have longer term chronic effects. This is everything from respiratory illness to issues around ability to focus, intuitive thought, fatigue, right? So there's also that mental health impact when we're exposed to certain indoor environments that are not healthy for us. And I will also add cardiovascular risk. People don't realize that with very small particulates that can actually get into the bloodstream. So indoor air quality is a space too many people took for granted. They take a deep breath and say, I guess it's pretty good. And people are rethinking this. They're highly sensitive to understand, is this good air quality now? And what's going to define that? So to your question, what does an employer do about this? So we work, of course, with the Wellbeing Standard, and we use third-party verification around our air quality features. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Right now, we need to test this air quality issue. So think about it a little bit like this. If you had a friend during the pandemic that said, I'm not sick, you wanted to trust them, but you'd like them to do a test. And returning to the workplace, you'd like to trust your employer who said, yep, the air quality is pretty good, but you'd like to have them test it, right? Because there's certain things we just can't detect. We don't have a biofeedback loop to detect it, right? So we need to do some testing on site. And so where the Wellbeing Standard can really help is everyone can download that today. They can look at the requirements for testing. There's quite a few organizations that are doing some of the pre-testing for air quality. There's quite a few strategies. If you're not already thinking about ventilation, outdoor ventilation, that's something we'll see, rapidly change. A lot of the experts on this call today will tell you that for many years, if not decades, we knew there needed to be more air changes. And that we were just pulled that back. Maybe there was an energy tension there. But there are ways to create improved air quality, improved ventilation, improved filtration to help the human occupants, right? While also thinking about other strategies for energy efficiency. So I would really say sort of overall is that humans are able to detect certain issues in the air quality short and long term, but many we can't. We need gatekeepers and building experts to do it for us. And you need to be able to test and track that with a team that can actually monitor this. And I would put even further that some building monitoring systems, I think, are really stepping in to have that ongoing maintenance component. And that really finally is that there are specific strategies you can do today on ventilation, filtration, cleaning practices, and deeply be thinking, of course, about the materials in your space.
Exactly.
And why this is so critical is we're seeing some really poor cleaning strategies develop where people are over cleaning, they're poorly ventilating. And as a result of it, you remember the era of sick building syndrome. You don't want to close up your building and close it up with certain toxins and then ask people to stay in that space. So I will sort of end on the note that there's a lot of innovations that are out there to really elevate material use, cleaning practices, and better understand indoor air quality. And I think that's really, part of what Tarkett is leading with the Great Indoors strategy. So we have to understand all of those components when you're thinking about air quality and the strategies that you can take.
Mike, I thought you also wanted to.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add to what Dr. Gray is saying. I think that there's a real opportunity there. I think with some of the clients we're talking to, there is an impulse to say, well, when we bring people back, we want to provide them more enclosure because offices have been so open. And of course, then you think, well, if I'm sitting in the open and there's something bad in the air, it's going to hit me. And so we have seen screens go up and things like that. And I think that there's actually a risk to too much enclosure because that could actually increase potential for poor air circulation and having people breathing in old air and old, dirty, air with high particulates and so forth, as Dr. Gray was referring to. And some of the recent research we did did find some links between the amount of enclosure and poor air quality, at least individuals' assessments of poor air quality, saying, oh, the air feels stuffy, I'm not sensing air movement, things like that. And as air quality diminished, we found problems with directly with eye irritation and also self-ratings of stress. And getting back to that idea of higher stress being indirectly related to poor air quality. So if you get stressed out and you're sitting and you're working, your muscles tighten up. And you don't even maybe even notice it. Your muscles just slightly tighten up all around. But if you're holding a fairly static posture over hours and hours every day, kind of stressed out, muscles a little bit tighter, you're going to start having chronic musculoskeletal pain, discomfort. And so there is this link between, you wouldn't think there would be, but there is a link between air quality, things like eye irritation, stress, and ultimately having actual physical, health symptoms that can be a long-term issue. So the answer isn't to enclose people necessarily. That's kind of one thing that we found. And I would also build on some of the things that I thought were kind of cool about the Tarkett's products. And I'm not like a paid endorser here at all. I didn't realize, but there are some kind of passive strategies that you can use if you think about the floor materials. And there are actually carpets that passively capture PM, particulate matter, and kind of hold it until it can be vacuumed up.
Yeah.
So there are strategies you can do that, you got to put a flooring in anyway. So why not do something to help pull some of that stuff out of the air?
That's interesting. Adrian, do you expect companies that produce products for the interior that they actually innovate on that? Do you expect that we come up with solutions for a better indoor air quality? Is that something that is that our responsibility, not ours, but all the producers for, like Steelcase, you just name it. Do you expect, or do you think you have to find solutions?
I would expect that the leading companies like Tarkett are going to do that. You guys are, you're at the forefront already anyways. And as designers, we lean on the manufacturers often to bring some of those things to our knowledge. We are a community that works together, and it's all of our responsibility to educate the clients and to take what we know and bring that down to them. So we are looking to manufacturers to make those sorts of recommendations to us so that we can then pass it on.
I want to add maybe to this point, a little bit in the space of that returning to work can actually be healthier for many people that do not have healthy home environments. And let me clarify that work from home, this is not work from home like normal. This is work from home during a pandemic. So we need to be clear on what we're comparing here and where the risk is. But for many people, they don't have a setting, for example, where they are considering air quality, right? Or they're in a cramped studio apartment. There's multiple people. There's cooking right next to them. We're not seeing good ventilation rates, right? Issues around ergonomics. So to Dr. O'Neill's point, sitting in a certain prone posture on a wood chair for prolonged periods of the day is not good either. So and there's this really important point that I want to make around the equity of returning to work for many people is that you actually create an environment that's healthy for all, not just for one person to return. And a lot of people are coming from a variety of situations, home environments, different stressful situations with family members, small apartments that they're managing, a lot of dynamics. And I think we're all familiar. I don't need to go through that list right now. So when our employer goes above and beyond to work with innovative, manufacturing partners to create a space with the highest level air quality, and they pursue WELL certification, they've done everything they can to create that physically safe place for you to return to. And that is an equity issue for many that if they're not given that option, they're going to continue to work in a very stressful environment that may not be positioned to really support their health and well-being. And I did get some questions, I think, coming in here, even around air purifiers and home environments. And I think it is overwhelming for consumers to say, how do I take an environment at home and try to create, the ideal safe environment? And happy to kind of talk more about that. But I think the point I really want to make is that it's difficult to know what is safe air quality. So when we have professionals and experts that create a safe working environment for you in the workplace, it provides access to all is our real goal, to be able to return to work, to provide that higher level air quality for all. And there's so many positive strategies that many leaders knew way before the pandemic. We're just ramping this because it's something that we really need to not just think as optional, it's about optimizing.
Exactly.
I'd like to add to what Dr. Gray is saying, and I love the idea that she just brought up, that she just introduced into the conversation about equity. And I think that as we evolve to some sort of a hybrid work experience, where obviously more work will probably be done at home or locations outside the office, we want to make sure that, you know, we know that health and we know that well-being is not distributed equitably, you know, across the population. It just isn't. And so there is an opportunity. I think we need to be looking at, like, what does that home environment look like? Is that equitable or is it not? But I think the powerful thing is that regardless of where you are in life and what part of the population, if we can create, if we have like a well standard and we have places, workplaces that are built to offer well-being, that is equally available to everybody, no matter what your background, no matter where you came from. If you're in that building, you are receiving equitably the benefits of the well-being, you know, of that safe and productive environment, regardless of who you are. And I think that, you know, from that standpoint, it's really kind of interesting. And I think it's a powerful chance for us to, at least, if you can't control where people are at other parts of their, oops, I just knocked over my water. It's getting so excited. You know, if we can't control where everybody is going to be working in this kind of more complex ecosystem of places, at least we'll be able to offer them that when they come into the workplace.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting. But if you agree with me, Dr. Gray, maybe this is a moment to ask our audience a question about this.
Perfect. Yes.
So this is just a little poll for you. Just give your opinion, and afterwards we will share the results. So just take your time, and then we will go on to the next question. But extremely interesting. What is the greatest threat to employee well-being as COVID-19 restrictions start to lift? What do you think about this? So just make your choice, and very interesting to see afterwards what the results are.
Oh, but Rob, that's not fair. We can't vote.
You can't vote.
Yeah, I don't get a vote.
Panelists don't get a vote.
Hey. You can tell.
I wanted to add a point here as we're waiting for folks to fill out this survey, is about empathy. So in the era of infectious disease, we really look at that kind of coming to a close in the US around, I won't say close, but shifting to more chronic disease really around the 1950s and 60s. And so our grandparents remembered polio, but many people today don't remember the idea of infectious disease. HIV targeted a very small population in that. And so there's not really the same understanding of infectious airborne diseases. And we moved into this world of chronic disease where we do a lot of victim blaming. And victim blaming means you look at the individual and say, oh, it's your fault that you're overweight. It's your fault that you're sick, right? It's not my fault. It's not, you know, I had nothing to do with what you ate or what you worked out, when you worked out. I really hope that we let go of victim blaming and we really start getting into a collective consciousness of empathy, which means that a person with COVID at the front desk is going to affect you the same as the CEO having COVID. You are sharing your air. You are in a collective space. And infectious disease reminds us how we share that collective space together and how everyone's health is impacted. And I do hope that we have a greater empathy for each other as we understand how literally closely linked we are in sharing these spaces that this infectious disease, unfortunately, has had to remind us.
We're almost, we're not running out of time, but we still have two interesting questions. How can businesses make sure that they meet well-being standards? Is there anyone from you who wants to react on that? Yes, please.
I wrote a lot of things down for this one because at CBRE, we are giving recommendations to our clients every day about this. But before we can make recommendations to our clients, we like to walk the walk. So like we do these things for ourselves, and that just helps us communicate them to our clients. So for our own personal offices, every new CBRE office has to be LEED, WELL, or Fit Well certified, or some combination of the three. And we were doing this, pre-pandemic. So our LA office was one of the first offices in the US to be WELL certified. And that's super important to us, and we are very proud of that. That office had over 1,000 plants. It had 100% purified air, enhanced humidity controls, circadian lighting, and antimicrobial surfaces throughout. These are all things that we are recommending to our clients that they still do. We have enhanced cleaning protocols as a standard in all of our offices. There are wellness and education programs, health programs on site that we offer. And then, we are really firmly rooted in activity-based work as well. We give all of our employees the autonomy to work where they want, when they need to work that way, suit their needs for the day. And that's something that we're seeing on the rise for all kinds of companies these days. As they come back to the office, corporations that we never thought would make this change from an assigned desk to activity-based work, they're making that change, and we are doing it as well. So that's something that's super important that's going to have to continue to be important. We also build out wellness rooms and mothers rooms separately. Those are two very different things that have very different needs. So it's important that we're providing both of those individually. We do interconnecting stairs that promote exercise. And then all of our offices are built with natural light, indoor air quality, and ergonomics top of mind. So we feel like it's really important that we do these things for ourselves before we can make these recommendations to our clients. And those are just a few things. It's like just scratching the surface of things that you can do to approach wellness in the workplace.
I think we're so lucky to have Adrienne on the line today because, when it comes to well-being, it's not like there's one size fits all design.
No.
Not at all.
And I think the more you connect with where your clients' needs are and really talk to them about some of the challenges that they have in their workplace, the better designed your space will be for the human health needs of your population. We work with clients everywhere from like Dubai to Dallas and Boston to Berlin to Budapest. So people are 99.8% genetically similar, but places are very different, so are cultures and behaviors. So I think that's the first. There's no one size, there's no Walmart version of wellness for all. The second thing is that it's overwhelming. I've been working in this field for quite a few years in the sense of saying that I've never had a designer say to me, Whitney, I'm just dying, no pun intended, to design an unhealthy space. That's what I want to do. Can't wait to do it. That's what I want to be known for. In fact, they'll really say to me, how do I do this? And then the question will be, is air quality more important or is movement? Is access to healthy food more important or is stimuli management and mental health? And the answer is it's all important. But as a designer, why I'm always humbled being able to work with designers is that they say, yeah, but tomorrow we got to make it happen. And so I've been really honored to work with the Wellbeing Standard really since the beginning in saying, let's give people a path. Here's where I start. Here's the basics around well-being in 10 concept areas. Let me look at air, water, light. Let me look at thermal comfort, mental health, movement. Let's think about mental health as part of all of that. Okay, here's where we start and here's where we're going. And when you're working with leaders such as Adrienne that can say to you, you're moving into a CBRE building, here's where we are in the pursuit of well, here's the features that we pursued, and we're going to communicate that out to you. That's really important. So you're educating people about the benefit of wellness. And then finally, don't say you did it, test it. Health not supposed to be cheap and easy. If you have a Snickers today, it's going to impact you, right? So you have to think the long term. You have to go in and actually get the test done and not just say you think you're healthy. So we have to test buildings. And frankly, I don't think people trust buildings anywhere near the way they used to. And if the building's walls could talk, right, they're going to say, you need to be thinking about the air quality and the water quality and making the invisible visible. So the Wellbeing Standard for us really allows leaders in the field to say, we've done it. Look, we've done it. We've measured it. You can scan the QRM code on the plaque outside the building if you need to know exactly what we've done. We've communicated it so you're not overwhelmed to understand what components of wellness you should start with. And finally, this is ongoing. A building evolves with people's needs over time. So for many contracts out there that are done once the space is designed or once the space is leased, we're seeing the leaders such as CBRE say, no, this is about tenant relationships. This is about ongoing monitoring. This is about a post-occupancy evaluation 1 year in, and we're seeing them evolve the space based on that. ASID has been an incredible case study for us in leading design communities to say, look what happens 500 days into a well building, 1,000 days into a well building. People will shift, things evolve. So certification, I think, also allows you to grow with what your occupants' needs are to really put people first inside those places.
I love that idea of what you're saying, Dr. Gray, about the, I've been in this business a long time too, and it was very rare that if you did a project that you did any sort of post-occupancy evaluation period, because it was just like, we put that fire out, we're moving on. I never want to think about that building, that horrible project, we got it done. You don't want to, and now it's, more and more companies are doing these post-occupancies, but that even what you're talking about with the well standard is like, no, this is ongoing. You're monitoring this, just like your car is now streaming data and it's always monitoring its health. I guess the other thing I would say too, to the points that Adrian was making, I always thought it was very cool. CBRE was such an early leader in this, with that original facility in Los Angeles. And then early on, a couple of years after that, I was involved with certifying a couple of locations, one in Shanghai and one in Los Angeles. And that was just a really interesting learning experience. Dr. Gray, to your points about what are the trade-offs? Wow, what circadian lighting versus, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't have to do that because we have glazing, we have floor to ceiling glazing. Is that more important than the water? I mean, because it's super complicated. I mean, I'm not a designer, but I was just doing the evaluation for that. And it is, so if you have the design support, that's super, super critical. And a couple of years ago, I was involved in writing a book called The Healthy Workplace Nudge with Rex Miller. And that was a great journey, because it really became apparent as we went through that process, and you start to think about design thinking and how do we nudge people, everything from their behaviors to using the architectural interior of the space to create opportunities to nudge people to make better decisions about their health, like punching through a central staircase that gives people, and slowing down the elevators. You can still take the elevator, but you're going to be kind of waiting. So isn't it easier just to take that staircase, or painting numbers on the risers of the staircase that show you how many calories you're burning as you go up the staircase? All these little things that are so super fun that you can do that just kind of nudge people in the right direction or offer opportunities. It's just almost unending, the kinds of things that you can do, Adrian, right? From the standpoint of design, it just goes on and on. It can be really a fun thing.
It sounds really
I'm giving away all my secrets.
Point.
By the way, we have some very interesting questions in the Q&A, and we can't handle them all, but some say that productivity has increased in the past year because employees are working more hours each week as they are not commuting. When they return to work and work normal hours, do you have any advice from management in terms of how to handle that and how it will impact on stress? That's a good question. Who wants to? Dr.
I have a lot to say about this. I have a lot to say about this. I think number one, employers need to be rethinking your metric for success. Performance is very tricky. I often say you can be very productive right before you burn out. So productivity is not going to be about how many widgets you produce. In fact, if you take a power nap, I could argue you're being very productive in that time. You're washing those D amyloids, you're able to focus, create a function. We know this from studying fighter pilots to surgeons. So let's, number one, rethink that metric. Number two, I think we're doing, as we said, the largest work from home experiment in modern time. And so people are going to start telling us how they have been able to focus and get work done. We need to listen to that. 9 to 5 in a beige on beige on beige desk where they're not moving, and productivity means that I can see you from across the room. I hope those days are gone. So it's about what you deliver, and it's going to be building on the research from Tarkett about the great indoors. I really think it was interesting, this idea of trust and openness and transparency. Yeah. The companies that are trying to figure out if you produced more widgets today are going to miss the fact that if their employees trust them, they'll actually produce more, and they'll hone into their schedule that allows them to be extremely productive when they need to be, right? And allows them to work best, which means not 9 to 5, right? Let's think about sleep patterns. Let's think about childcare. Let's think about breaks in the middle of the day and then being able to focus in the evening if they need to. People are going to come to work and say, there's a new model for how I work best. Number 3, I think that we really need to build on the work with, Rex Miller, I mentioned earlier, and Jeff Jernigan around trauma. And do not assume that in the first 3 months of return to work, that your employee is just going to be able to overproduce yesterday. I think we're going to understand that there's an emotional intelligence factor to managers that's not about widget making. And I think the companies that are getting ahead of understanding that those managers are going to have to be more than just determining project management, are going to have to be doing people management in new ways, are going to succeed in this sort of healing space. And the last part that I'll say there is that let's just turn to our incredibly creative professionals that are on the line today. There's a lot of constraint, right? Constraint being we are fearful of returning to work. We are excited to return to work. Our buildings were a certain way that they don't have to be anymore. We are healing and we're not sure exactly how that's all going to go. And why I love working with designers is because I think the leading designers in this country are saying this is a beautiful space. Take a deep breath and go, what could we create? How could we create symbiotic spaces, more with nature, more connectedness and empathy, you know, where we really think about how people work at their best and live their best. That work-life concept that Tarkett has been supporting, I think, is really interesting here. I almost kind of get chills when I think about it myself, like the idea that your employer would care about you. You'd walk in the building and you feel like the building cared about you. So there is, I think, a lot of room to move from, is my employee being productive and producing widgets, to sort of the bright future, which is going to be, am I creatively thinking about a space the building attracts you to come into, that it is focused on people. And in doing so, we don't think about productivity. We think about moving from surviving to thriving.
You understand that no one wants to stay at home anymore now, eh? I mean, everybody wants to go back to the office.
Yeah, they just want to feel safe. And I would think some of the things, I love what you're saying, Dr. Gray. And I think that the other big challenge and maybe opportunity is that so many companies are organized, is depending on the culture, as sort of a management pyramid, right? Where it's top-down decision-making, you're told what to do, you're down at the bottom somewhere and you're cranking away there. And we can do that because I see you every single day. I see the back of your head sitting in your cubicle. And so we're going to need to shift the opportunities to shift more to management by objective. And if you've ever managed remote teams and things like that, you can't see them every day. You just have to go, you know, I'm less interested in knowing that you're sitting in front of your laptop for 9 hours than I am, did you get the work done and is it a good quality? So that all of these changes that we're talking about are absolutely as much driven by management practices and culture as they are the space. But I think for the first time, we're thinking of those things together as a system, as an organism that has to, all the pieces have to work together. And the other thing I would say too is that, you know, from the perspective of working now for the last while with Tarkett, and I think it's a wonderful, you know, the kinds of things Tarkett's been saying is everything that we've been doing around, you know, rethinking what does well-being mean and integrating that into the space and all these new ideas that we're having. And I would also say to all the designers and the architects that are on this call, it's something that both of the other panelists said at the beginning, is that you can be an advocate for well-being. There are so many things you can do, whether you're nudging people or whether you're specifying products that are you know, healthier, they're not off-gassing, things like that. There's just a million opportunities that never really were considered, I think, with the same level of you know, impact that we need to do that now.
Yeah. I just want to add one more thing around the notion of productivity. Because I think it was mentioned earlier, like everyone works differently at home. And for some people, you're really productive at home. For others, you're not. So when employers are starting to invite their employees back into the office, I think it's going to be important that they rethink what that office is and what it means for them and why they should come back in. Is it because at home I can't focus and I need that heads down space at work? Well, for another employee, it's probably the opposite. I focus really well at home, but I don't get to interact with my employees or my coworkers in a meaningful way. So that's why I'm going to go back. So it's going to be important to like not just go back and to think that the office is going to be what it always was. And to, you know, kind of take a pulse check on your employees and why they want to come back and what they're looking for, and make sure that you're addressing each of their individual needs as they come back.
This is just too interesting. I mean, I have a feeling we can talk hours and hours on this. And we can't, unfortunately, the time is up. Well, like I said, it's extremely inspirational. And just one question from me to the end. Do you think that there should be more cooperation between different companies I mean, should we work together with flooring producers, sorry, with furniture producers or ventilation industries to create this perfect atmosphere? Or we're not doing that at the moment, but do you see an opportunity there for companies to help you create this better working environment?
Certainly some coordination. Yeah, why not?
Absolutely.
It's so
exactly.
complex
why
and
wouldn't
technical. Yeah, right. You know, I mean, you know, the kind of expertise that, say, a furniture manufacturer could bring versus, and not knowing much about the flooring world, you know, some sort of point of coordination could be a really cool idea.
I mean, I think ultimately, a lot of people don't understand when you say good flooring equals well-being. So where is the story? Like, how do we actually create an environment? It's not about flooring, it's about the human environment, the human ecosystem, and it's part of a whole. But I think it's up to us to get out of our lingo, out of our products, and into a story and a narrative that people are ready for around how do you create a space for health. And I think it's really humbling for me coming from the field of public health. I don't understand design terms. I'm like always a person being like pre-design what, huh? And R factor what? And you know, I don't know those terms. And likewise, a lot of people don't understand the design terms. And so I think really going from parts to whole, going from lingo to something that's more accessible for a population to feel like they're part of this is so important. And I will I kind of close out here. Just one comment is just so happy for everyone that's sent questions in. I see Dr. Veach is out there. I see Zada, so many people, and I think we'll do our best to circle back with some of those questions. I really appreciate that. And as sort of a hopeless extreme extrovert that's boxed into Zoom meetings, if you would like to at all reach out to us, the Wellbeing Standard, or just give me a shout out on LinkedIn, and I'm sure the other speakers would appreciate that. It's always so much fun to hear from people in the ether after this discussion, like what's on your brain, what are you thinking about, what did we spark new thoughts on. So I guess that's my hopeless plea at the end, is to please do connect in this new virtual space, because I think we'd really love to hear from you.
Yeah, let's not stop here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I want to thank Tarkett, Rob, thanks for the great job, and your team. This was really a great conversation, and to my fellow panelists as well. I hope we can do some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I hope we can do another one, because like I said, it's too interesting. I want to thank you a lot. I mean, it was a really, really good hour, and I'm sure that our panelists really enjoyed it. And we've been sharing all your links with all your information that you want to share with our audience. So thank you again, and hopefully until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be well.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.